Hey guys, today I'm going to talk to you about my favorite podcasts. So I am a podcast lover, and I am always surprised at the amount of people who still don't know what a podcast is. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's basically a group of people, or two people, or one person talking into a microphone about a subject, and sometimes it's not even about one certain subject, but I find them really entertaining. I have about a 45-minute commute to and from work, and I just find podcasts to be a good way to spend that time for me because, you know, with music, let's be honest, Pandora plays you the same 7 songs over and over again. And so I just think that there's a great variety in podcasts, and it really does make my drive go super fast. Sometimes I sit in my car in the parking lot just to listen to like the last 5 minutes of my podcast. I think when people think of podcasts, a lot of times they just think of somebody who wants to learn about like the stock market, which there are a lot of podcasts about finances and the stock market, and even about career advice. There's a ton of good marketing podcasts out there. There's some good teaching ones, really good tech ones. You can basically find a podcast on any subject that you're interested in. But for me personally, I really like true crime podcasts. So that is going to be the majority of the podcasts that I talk about, but I do have a couple other ones thrown in there from when I first started listening, and I didn't realize that the whole true crime thing had really evolved greatly with podcasts. So let's get into it. So I started listening to podcasts in my sophomore year of college, and in college I majored in journalism, and I'm not exactly sure why, because I don't like reading the news at all. But one day we got an assignment where we had to listen to an episode of This American Life and then write about how journalism can be told through audio. And I listened to that episode, and then I fell in love with the show. So This American Life takes one topic. It's usually centered on something that's happening currently in the world, and they break it up into 3 different stories. Now, it's not just like a news story where they're reporting facts. They really do tell it like a story, and they go talk to people, or they investigate, or they turn it into an actual short story. It is really entertaining. It's not like listening to the news at all, but you do come out of it really learning something, which I love. The host, Ira Glass, is also great. I think that he does a really good job at making it flow through the parts and making sure that all of the stories are really connected together. I think this one is probably the most appropriate podcast that I'm gonna suggest. It is usually something that you can listen to with kids in the car if you have them in there. They might not be all that entertained by it, but you will be. So the second podcast that I really started listening to in college was Ear Biscuits by Rhett and Link. Now, if you're familiar with YouTube at all, you are probably familiar with Rhett and Link. They host Good Mythical Morning, which is like a weekday short 10 to 15 minute show where they do a bunch of crazy things. They tell different stories, they do taste tests, and have fun games. And I love Good Mythical Morning. I think Rhett and Link are just some of the 2 most likable people on YouTube, and I think they do a really good job at what they do. And they started their podcast, I think like maybe back in 2013, and I started listening to it in 2014. So in their first couple seasons, how they structured their show was they sat down with another internet celebrity, usually a YouTuber, sometimes it was a Viner, which that's gone now, but they would talk to them about their childhood and what they liked doing and growing up and how basically they got to where they are now. It was really interesting to hear all those different stories and how a lot of them were really, really similar. So if you're interested in that, I think it's a great podcast. They did take about a 1.5-year hiatus from September 2015 to just last month, and they finally came back with their new season, and I don't think it is going to be the same as it was before. I don't think they're going to be focusing on other internet celebrities. I think they're going to be doing more personal stories from their lives, and then also just random topics, almost like an extension of Good Mythical Morning. But I love Rhett and Link. I think that they're hilarious and so positive, and I always like to listen to this one in the morning. It's a good way to start my day. And this is another one that is mostly going to be okay to listen to with kids in the car. So the next one that I got hooked on that really got me interested in true crime podcasts was Serial. I know that if you've heard of podcasts, you might have heard of them through Serial. The very first season of Serial was about Adnan Syed, I don't know how to say it, but he was convicted and he's currently serving time for killing his girlfriend way back, I think it was in the 1990s. And this story goes through whether he actually did it or not, and it was huge in the news. A lot of people listened to it, a lot of people loved it, and I also really loved it. The second season came out, and that was about Bo Bergdahl, who was a traitor in Afghanistan. I'm not going to take a stance on that, I'll let you listen. That one was very different from the first season, and I'm going to be honest, when I was listening to it, I wasn't totally in love with that season, but afterwards I am really glad that I did listen to it, and I do think it's worth listening to. I know that they did come out with a new show called S-Town, and that one is also about murder. I have not listened to it yet, but it's definitely on my list, and I probably will recommend it just because I think that Serial and S-Town are both produced by the same people who produce This American Life, and so I can't see how they could do anything wrong. So I would definitely check those out, especially as an introductory to true crime podcasts, because it doesn't get too graphic, it doesn't get too inappropriate, but it really does start to dive into some of the same issues that a lot of true crime podcasts cover. So I would highly recommend checking both of those out. The next is one of my all-time favorites, and it's called My Favorite Murder, and it is hosted by Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff. Now these two are absolutely hilarious. I love them together. They vibe super well. There's never like a dull moment at all in this podcast. So this one is about true crime, and they pick a murder. It started off as their favorite murders, and now it kind of just goes into any murder that they choose for the week, and they each kind of go into a different one. So you get to hear about 2 different murders in this one podcast. And I'm gonna tell you right now, don't go to this one for facts, and they say this themselves, but they're not super fact oriented. I would say that they probably just look at the Wikipedia article and read that out loud is kind of what it seems like, but it doesn't matter because they're so funny the whole time. Like, it's like sitting around listening to your friends talk. I really enjoy it. I will say that with this one, you have podcasters who have short introductions and then they get into their topic, and then you have ones that have long ones. And I think Karen and Georgia, they started with, they had a very short, it was like 2 minutes, and then they got into their murders, then 5 minutes, and 10 minutes, and 15 minutes, and now at this point, it's almost half them talking about their introductory stuff and then getting into their murders. But personally, I don't mind because I started at the very beginning and I've worked my way up, and with that, you really do get to know both of these women, and you care just as much about their lives as you do about the murders that they're talking about. So I personally, that doesn't bother me at all. But if you are going to be a new listener, I would tell you to start at the beginning. I wouldn't tell you to jump right in because I don't know how far you'll make it through your first one if you're just sitting there listening to people talk about their lives and you don't know who they are. So I would suggest starting at the beginning, and it is so worth it. I have a shirt, I'm wearing their shirt right now, and I don't really ever buy merch from anyone, but I had to with them. They're so hilarious, and they are touring right now, and all of their shows are just selling out. So definitely you should listen to this one. The next one is, again, another one that I highly recommend, and it is Last Podcast on the Left. Now this one is not going to be for everyone. It definitely won't. They are very vulgar, very brash, very inappropriate, but so funny. So funny, and they're also a true crime podcast. Well, they do more than just true crime, actually. They do aliens, paranormal activity, cults. They really do kind of a wide range of topics, but a big bulk of them are true crime, which is what I love. I personally don't really like the alien stuff as much. I do listen to it sometimes, but that's just not for me, but that's not a problem. You can always just skip an episode if you don't want to listen to it. But they cover their podcast so well. They really do a lot of research. It sounds like they almost practice the whole podcast beforehand because it goes so streamlined. There's never really an awkward moment between the three, and they have 3 co-hosts on this one: Henry, Marcus, and Ben. And to be honest, I still to this day cannot tell the difference between Henry and Marcus's voices. I don't know who's talking when they're talking. But They just do an incredible job at covering these cases and keeping it super interesting. But again, they are a little bit more vulgar. They curse a lot. A funny story about this one time last summer, I was listening to it with my windows rolled down, and a car came up next to me, and there was a child in the seat with their window down next to me, and I was listening to this podcast, and they were saying some not great things. And I look over and the mom is just giving me death eyes into my car. So I like kind of reached out and just like slowly turned down the volume until the light turned green. But I love it. They're great. I definitely recommend this if you're interested in true crime or paranormal activity or aliens or cults or any of that. They cover everything well, and they are so passionate about it. So the next true crime podcast that I like is called True Crime Garage. Now, I listened to this one a couple months ago when they covered the Slender Man case, because I didn't see very many other podcasters covering this case, and I'm from Wisconsin, so it really interested me. But when I listened to it, I thought that they covered the case well, but I really did not like the two hosts, Nick and the captain, and honestly, it didn't seem like they liked each other either. But then a couple weeks ago, I was kind of running low on the podcast that I was listening to, and I went back and I listened to a few others of theirs, and I ended up loving them. Like, now I love these two. I kind of get more of their vibe after listening to a couple of them than just the one that I had listened to before. They kind of do almost have like argumentative personalities with each other. They do kind of like to butt heads a little bit, but that's what makes them who they are, and that's kind of what makes their personalities. And they do such a good job at covering the cases. They do a lot of research. What they like to say is they pick cases to cover that they know that they can add something to. They don't want to just be taking information that's already out there and just kind of churning through it. They like to have different opinions. They like to really research, not conspiracy theories, but like alternative theories, and they like to really go into different ways of looking at the case. Nick is an audio engineer, I believe, and so they did an amazing case on Brandon Lawson, who had this really kind of complicated 911 call, and Nick went through and he like played the 911 call back over and over again, and he sped it up and he slowed it down and he messed with the levels just to see if they could find anything else out there that maybe necessarily wasn't not discovered, but just something that other podcasters wouldn't talk about. And I just think they do a great job. I'm listening, I just downloaded like all of their episodes, and I'm going back and listening through them. So I would definitely recommend them. And I feel like they're very grateful that their podcast is a success, and I think other podcasters definitely are, but with them you can really feel how happy they are that they are able to do this as, I think, their career now. So I would check them out definitely. So those are some of my favorite podcasts, and if you're a podcast listener and have any recommendations for me, definitely let me know, because I'm always open to download some more. If you do check out any of mine, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. I put on some self-tanner yesterday, so let me know if I look orange. My favorite murder.